So it's quite peculiar how you go from somebody who claims to be, best auditor in Ohio to 32 years in office, or coming up on 32 years in office, and doesn't have a succession plan. The succession plan is some guy we've never heard of, has never been involved, doesn't appear to have the experience or qualifications relevant to the position, and appears to have a make-work job. So Thursday the 29th was the Frontier Days Parade and the world premiere of GREGG GENTILE or GENTILE, who appears to be Linda Fraley's handpicked replacement to be auditor. You probably saw the video of me trying to ask him very difficult questions like, what's one change you would make, or what's one policy position, and him staring at me like a deer in headlights. He would not answer any questions. But Luiza here of the Raised Right PAC, you asked him some questions, and you had witnesses, in the staging area since you were in the event. And then maybe after, asked him a couple of questions. So since GREGG GENTILE won't interview with anybody or take questions on camera, we're going to go over, Luiza offered to go over what were some of the questions that she asked to Mr. GENTILE, and what were some of his answers. So what were some of the questions that you asked him? Or let's just get right into it. What were the questions you asked him, and what were his answers?
I believe he likes to go by Gentile. So before the parade, I approached GREGG and wanted to know from him, what did he do before? Why is he here now?
Okay.
And my question to him was, what did you do before you got involved in Clermont County a year ago? Because he got employed a year ago at the auditor's office by Linda Fraley, and he said he was retired.
Okay.
And I said, oh, okay. And he said, yeah, he taught golf lessons. He did golf tournaments. He was a caddy. And I said, well, it sounds like you're having quite a good time,
retirement?
Right? Retiring.
So I checked, and because we're going to get into a briefing book that I put together on Mr. GENTILE based on stuff I pulled and that you've sent to me some. And but he's 55 right now.
Right.
Okay, so he's 55, so he was retired, teaching golf lessons. Okay, so that was his background. What else?
Well, I asked him, so why are you, doing this now? I mean, why would someone, is having a good time in retirement, come into our county and take on such a big position, right? Because auditor is a big position for our county. And he told me that he was bored. He was bored, that he needed more of a challenge.
Okay.
And I said to him, well, isn't it that possibly Linda Fraley went and got you to come and work for our county?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh no, he doesn't know Linda Fraley. He just wanted something more challenging. So I asked him, well, before your retirement, what else were you in? And he went on about he's got a 3-year degree in financing, that he had a financing consulting services. And when we pulled his work history, he doesn't have anything on financing. He's just got everything on medical. So he worked mostly for medical companies.
So we'll get back to what we pulled off of his history and his resume and so forth. What other questions did you ask him?
I asked him if he was aware of the politics in Clermont County, if he was involved, if he knew anything about it, and he said no. And I said, well, maybe you should come to some central committee meetings. And he goes, oh, you think that's a good idea?
So he's not ever been active. He's not on central committee.
No.
As far as we know, he's never been to a central committee meeting.
No.
Is that correct?
No, that's correct. He actually said that he's never been to one.
Okay. What else did you ask him?
Well, I kind of started talking a little bit about the politics in Clermont County and what's going on, and he kind of remained very oblivious to what is going on in Clermont County, which I don't believe it to be true, because you can't trust these people, right?
So everything you talked about up to this point was what you asked him before the parade started in the staging area. Did you get a chance to talk to him or interact with him after the parade, and what question or questions did you ask him after?
Yes, so Don Wigman, who was the DJing on our float, we were stopped at a light and we asked GREGG Don asked Greg if he believed in the Constitution. And
Okay.
Greg,
Easy. That's a layup question. What was
Yeah.
his answer?
he like stepped up and he did this and he said, I'm in the private sector. And we all kind of just looked at each other, myself, Don, and Leslie, that is in my pack.
Leslie Knepper.
Yes,
Okay.
and we were like, and Leslie was like, what kind of answer is that? I said, well, he's obviously not about the Constitution, but he's definitely
Well, but
about
hold on
the
a second.
institution.
Doesn't he work for the government? So how is he in the private sector if he's working for the government in the auditor's office? But it makes no sense whatsoever.
No,
So
I mean, the response was just...
idiotic.
Well, it was a no, right? It was a no.
I don't know if it's a no. It's a just it doesn't make any sense for
doesn't
the
take a
question that was
stand.
asked.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think...
but by the way, as a tip, I don't know too much, but I'm thinking even if you were a Democrat or a liberal, you would say if somebody asked you, do you support the Constitution, or you would say yes.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that would be the right answer.
Yeah.
Not I'm in the private sector or
Yeah.
I play basketball. That would be another inappropriate response to
Right.
do you support the Constitution?
Right, like nothing to do with the subject.
Okay, so you asked him after about the Constitution. He gave a bizarre answer to it. So maybe he made the right choice by not responding to me whatsoever and just looking at me with a blank stare. Because if he can't answer a question of supporting the Constitution, where the answer is yes,
How's he going to answer
how's he
the
going to answer a
questions?
question about the actual functions of the office? Anything else from the parade that you asked him or talked about?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
So after it, you sent me, here's a funny thing. I had a bunch of outstanding record requests to the auditor's office, one of which was for Mr. Gentile's personnel file, which I just got back. I haven't even shared with you. It's in this folder. I got the watchdog dossier of what we have. But you had texted me some of his voting history and so on and so forth in here. So we've got all this, his stuff. His stuff he sent to the Central Committee members, his voting history, which Luiza texted to me, and then I went out and printed a copy of his voting history, and then his personnel file, which is very short. It's only 10 pages. And then you also had, and I printed out and put in here, I believe, you had texted me some of his LinkedIn information on his background. So
Right.
why don't we start with the things that you brought to my attention, his voting history. So that's behind, it's on the left side, behind the
I'll just look at you.
behind his. You can take that one with you for your PAC
Okay,
meetings, and we'll
yeah.
look on the one I
Yeah.
have. So so his voting history is
Down here? Starts down here?
that he's a regular voter, looks like. So we're looking at his voting history and so we're going to look at the last couple primaries, okay? So the 20, so there would have been the 2020
The primaries?
he voted absentee. 2022 primary. Did I cut it off here? He voted at the polling place. 2020 primary. 2020 primary, he voted absentee. That was the COVID primary.
Right.
So he has voted in the primaries. 2018, he did not. So in 2018, he did not vote in the primary. In 2016, he voted in the primary. Okay. And then he shows in the voter database as being a Republican,
Right.
which in Ohio, you become a Republican not by saying you're Republican, but by voting in Republican primaries.
In the primaries.
Automatically makes you a Republican. So his voting history is fine,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, let's remember Vivek.
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 Dylan Blevins hit me to this. It's actually pronounced Vivek.
Vivek.
He is not. I don't believe he's ever voted in a primary.
Huh.
So
Interesting, yeah.
any event. So that's his voting history, and then his work history is another thing that you hit me to on LinkedIn.
Right.
So why don't you, hit on what you saw in his work history?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, what stands up when you look at his work history is that in the past, he's always worked for medical companies. It doesn't show that he's worked in any type of financing. He's been he's deputy auditor now of Clermont County, but the previous
Part-time.
Yeah.
So it says that, so he's a part-time employee of the auditor's office. From his
Right.
personnel file, I know he gets paid $50,000 a year.
Which is $40. You had
$40 an hour. Yeah,
$40
okay.
an hour. Yeah.
So
Before he was president at G. Allen and Associates, board member for Pierce Township of Zoning Appeals, worked again for Neo.
Marketing.
Yeah, marketing for Neo's therapeutics, then Healthy Advice Networks, Med Learning.
all pharmaceutical
All
stuff.
pharmaceutical stuff. I mean, going all the way back, cardiovascular sales specialist. So I don't see any
Finance real or
any financing experience at all. He worked for public health nursing.
so those are references
Yeah,
or other
that's it,
people.
yeah.
Okay, so his
So-
background doesn't appear to have anything to do with auditors, auditing, accounting,
Nothing.
finance,
Nothing.
or any of that kind of stuff. And it says here he works part-time. From his personnel file, he gets paid $50,000 a year.
Right.
But if you do the math, okay, so he can only work up to, it says 15, I think it says 1,560 hours a year. So $50,000 at $40 an hour would not be full-time. So I got his personnel file where it says he gets paid $50,000 a year, but if you do the math, that says part-time, because if you were, a typical year is 2,080 hours would be a typical year of working. So with 50,000 at $40 an hour says that's not full time, because it would be over 80,000 if it was full time at the same rate. So anyway, so he gets 50,000. I think his thing says that he can work up to 1,560 hours per year. He was hired on May 14th, 2024. So he barely. Yeah, so his letter to the Central Committee was on May 5th. So he hadn't even worked part-time for the auditor's office for a year when he's the handpicked successor for Linda Fraley, who claimed to you that he didn't really know Linda Fraley
Right.
until, okay, and then one thing I noticed too, and I'm sure you're going to look through this because I hadn't given this to Luiza before now, he has no resume in his in his personnel file. I asked about it. I've sent a note back to Chris Melman, who sent the file, and I'll be interested to see, did he not have a resume when he got hired? You know, remember, the auditor's office in Clermont County has historically been a Linda Fraley Friends and Family Employment Bureau. So it would be totally in keeping with that office that somebody got hired without any qualifications or a resume for that matter. And so that's the
I mean, it just shows again that we doing this musical chair relationships where, hey, you my friend, doesn't matter if you have experience or not, but we're just going to stick you in here.
Well, I'm looking here in this file, and I looked at the cover letter, and then there's another letter, a Linda Fraley letter to him in the back. It's only 10 pages in total, that entire thing, the entire personnel file. And so on March 31,
Of this year.
it was it says reclassified from part-time to full-time position, but his LinkedIn says he's part-time, but it still is part-time. He's getting the same amount of pay, $50,000. And this is March 31, 2025. And it just, what's interesting too is nothing in his personnel file says what he does.
Yeah.
It just says outside services. He was hired for outside services, whatever that means. Probably stay at home and don't do any work. Yeah. So,
Well, that's kind of
But it's like- but
the
it's-
in club, right?
he has no resume in his personnel file. He doesn't appear to have any qualifications that would relate to working for an auditor's office or being a deputy auditor, because position was reclassified as deputy auditor outside services. And there's nothing in his personnel file that says what he does. What's very peculiar too is Linda Fraley has been in office or will be in office for 32 years, 8 terms of 4 years, clearly not a believer in term limits, not a believer in advancing. Okay, so the longest, I think LaRose said she was going to be the longest serving elected official in Clermont, in Ohio. But you would think if you're such a great auditor, at some point you would have run for auditor of state.
Right.
I hate politicians that just sit there and camp out in an office. But her, 32 years. And what was the succession plan?
Right.
Most businesses would have a succession plan for who's going to take over when the boss retires or goes away. We know Linda Fraley already retired and is already collecting a pension for retiring and her paycheck. But what was the succession plan? So everybody thought maybe like Chris Melman, who's been the chief deputy for a long time, would be the next auditor. But from my understanding, he would actually take a pay cut to be auditor because he gets paid more as the chief deputy than as auditor, and that a lot of the other deputies didn't want the job. And so it's quite peculiar how you go from somebody who claims to be, best auditor in Ohio to 32 years in office, or coming up on 32 years in office, and doesn't have a succession plan. The succession plan is some guy we've never heard of, has never been involved, doesn't appear to have the experience or qualifications relevant to the position, and appears to have a make-work job that in his entire personnel file, there's nothing that indicates why he was even hired or what his skills are.
Well, at least a resume.
There's not. He has a resume in the packet that he sent to the Central
Committee, right.
And
but not for applying for the position.
Yeah, it just has, So this is this is a good find right here. I'm glad I flipped to this. In what he sent to the Central Committee members, he does have a description of what he does for the auditor's office. And listen to this one, it's a doozy. Represent the auditor's office in the community by attending township, county, department, and local organization meetings, listening to the citizens and promoting open data, that's capitalized, platform to educate taxpayers and help local government utilize resources most effectively. Make work job. Citizens paying for some make work job.
Right.
So, and what's bizarre is, in theory, he should be outreach. So he doesn't seem very outreach when you ask him questions with a camera.
No. If you go down here, I guess.
Oh, he's still working for someplace else.
Yeah. President of G. Allen and Associates, and again, verbatim, sole proprietor providing strategic marketing consulting to
pharmaceutical, medical device, sporting goods,
and service business via single project engagements to full-time marketing leadership roles. Nothing about financing. There's no financing.
Well, the most important part of that is he's still doing another job.
Right.
So he has 2 jobs.
That's why he's
his
only
government
working
job.
part-time.
He has his government. Yeah, but his position was reclassified as full-time in
now.
March.
Mm-hmm.
But he says in his resume he sent to the committee that he is both working for the auditor's office, but still the president of a sole proprietorship doing marketing consulting to pharmaceutical, medical device, and I guess and sporting goods. Those don't seem to go together, but
No.
pharmaceutical, medical device, and sporting goods.
I just don't understand how.
It literally makes no sense.
No.
This literally makes no sense. So I can understand why he wants to avoid interviews.
Of course, he can't answer.
It's because it doesn't make sense.
He's in the private sector.
How he is there. So you have your briefing
Yeah, I've
book
got mine.
copy. I have my briefing book. Wouldn't it be interesting if there was a briefing book like this on
Everyone.
public official? That was available or maybe published online, so you could
Yeah.
go in and look at every public official
Yep.
and what they're doing or not doing.
Yeah.
It's something we need in our community because this is clearly the face of cronyism in Clermont County.
Absolutely.
Not just the idiocy of it, but the belief that you can just pick your successor and they don't have to have the qualifications, and that's just the way it works. And what kind of person do you think this guy's going to be? Lapdog to the establishment.
To the establishment,
When
yeah.
what we need in the auditor's office is somebody who can focus on how we can effectively, what would be ways to cut taxes in Clermont County.
Right.
By rolling back sales tax, things that are within the purview of the county itself, rolling back sales tax, reducing some of the levies. But I'm a strong believer in Elon Musk. You're from South Africa, right?
Yes, I am, yeah.
So another South African. I'm a strong believer in the notion of that you can provide better and more capable services at significantly less cost. That definitely can happen in Clermont County, I think. And there needs to be somebody in that position that is not just a lapdog and is thinking about the pain so many people are experiencing with out of control property taxes and other taxes in Clermont County, and at least work up the plans for the commissioners to be put on the spot about tax reductions and spending cuts within Clermont County.
Well, maybe by Mr. Gentile attending all those meetings, maybe he'll be able to come up with a plan what he's going to do as auditor.
Hey, I go to meetings, and have you ever seen him at a meeting?
No.
Yeah, I haven't seen him at a meeting for the
Central
outreach.
Committee, I mean.
He hasn't been at a central committee, but I haven't seen him at a government meeting.
No.
And for all you would think he would be attending every, for example, every commissioner meeting,
Right.
so that he could learn about the commissioners, but maybe.
You haven't seen him there?
No,
No.
I've never seen. Now, I haven't gone in maybe a few weeks. I don't go all the time, but in the parade, I walked up to him saying, "Are you GREGG GENTILE?" I can know to pronounce it Gentile, because I didn't even know what he looked like.
Right.
But he just was. And another tip for him would be, if you're the candidate walking in a parade, don't just wear the same T-shirt that everybody else you have there with you is wearing. Wear like a suit or something so people can understand that's the guy. Dylan does that.
You stick out.
Yeah, you stick out as being you're the actual guy.
Right.
So, all right. By the way, we're at Panera Bread Inn on
Milford.
28 on Milford, Miami Township. And I appreciate Luiza taking the time on a busy day, to help me with what she asked GREGG GENTILE and what he answered, as well as talking some about his background based on the documents. Hopefully GREGG will change his mind and sit for an interview. I think if he doesn't, it's going to say a lot about him.
How do you vote for someone when you don't know exactly who
That's
he
the
is
normal
or what
Clermont
he's
County
going to
way.
do? Yeah.
That's the normal Clermont
Yeah.
County way.
Well, we
Hand
kind
you a
of-
card.
Right, and we sneak them in there, right?
Yeah, hand
We
you a
sneak
card.
it-
You
yeah.
don't know anything about them. Just vote what the card tells
Right.
you. That's got to end. That
Yeah.
is unproductive. That's what results in cronyism and corruption.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
thank you very much, Luiza.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a great
I
rest of the day.
appreciate it. You too. Thank you.